In the week before their departure to Arrakis, when all the final scurrying about had reached a nearly unbearable frenzy, an old crone came to visit the mother of the boy, Paul. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. As I'm sure you're all well aware, there's another Dune film adaptation coming out next month, and to say that I'm excited about it would be a huge understatement. To prepare for this momentous occasion, I've started rereading the novel so that I can better compare the two products once the film comes out, and to maybe leverage the YouTube algorithm in my favor. I will likely end up making several Dune videos over the coming month or so here, so if you are as hyped as I am for the movie, I hope you'll enjoy my upcoming content. You may be asking yourself, what is Dune? If you are, you've been living under a rock possibly, or you just don't watch TV, and that's okay. Dune is possibly the single greatest science fiction novel ever written, in my objectively correct opinion. Getting back into this book, which I haven't read in probably 15 years or so, has been an absolute treat and a delight. Simply put, Frank Herbert was a genius in basically every aspect that makes a story work. His plotting, characters, world building, and conflict, and his mastery of all of these elements is on display from the start of the book. And since I'm really interested in writing and writing structure, I decided that for today, I just want to take a deeper look at just the first chapter of Dune and examine how Herbert establishes some of these characters and conflicts from the outset. My hope is that this analysis will be useful to anyone who may be struggling with how to craft a gripping first chapter. In a nutshell, a first chapter should do a few things that will probably sound pretty obvious. You want to establish at least one character who the reader should care about, aka your protagonist. The protagonist needs to do something that establishes why we should care about them, though the specifics of that type of scene will depend on what type of genre you're writing in and how quickly you need to get to your main conflict, but usually it'll involve some kind of challenge to overcome, which can be of varying importance and difficulty. So that's a very open-ended, bare-bones take on first chapters, but let's take a look at how Herbert handles this. So the book begins with that sentence. In the week before their departure to Arrakis, when all the final scurrying about had reached a nearly unbearable frenzy, an old crone came to visit the mother of the boy, Paul. With just this one line, we have a few pieces of information helping us set the scene. There's a time frame. It's a week away from leaving for Arrakis, whatever that is right now. What's happening right now is that there's lots of packing and preparing going on. And then who's involved right now in this scene? We've got an old crone, a mother, and a boy named Paul. If you're familiar with Dune, you'll know that the old crone is the Reverend Mother Helen Gaius Mohiam, or Mohiam? I'm not sure. The mother is Jessica, and the boy is obviously Paul. Paul Atreides, specifically, the son of Duke Leto, but the only name given in the opening sentence is Paul. Herbert is very deliberate with his word choice here. Even though the visitor is ostensibly coming to see Jessica, the sentence is positioned around Paul, with his name being the final word. The implication then is obviously that the visitor is not actually here to see Jessica, but Paul. This is one of those opening sentences that prompts lots of questions, and I think it's just handled really well. And before I continue, I will say that I'm not someone who thinks that every opening sentence has to be the most gripping thing ever. I don't put a book down after reading only a single sentence or a paragraph or even a chapter really, but I do like first chapters that pose more questions than they answer, and this sentence and the chapter as a whole is an excellent example of this. Now, I don't plan to narrate the whole chapter out loud, so let me go ahead and summarize some things so that way I can fully explain what else Herbert is doing here. So in a nutshell, the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam has come to test Paul, son of Duke Leto Atreides, and Jessica, the Duke's concubine, to see if he is human or animal, in more of a metaphorical sense, not so much of a literal sense. Some really important information that's established early on is that Jessica and Mohiam are both members of the Bene Gesserit, a mystical order of women who have meddled with the course of humanity for millennia, and through their breeding program, they bring about, or they want to bring about, the Kwisatz Haderach, a very important figure in their mythos. I really hope I pronounced that correctly. In addition to this, we learn that the Atreides family is preparing to leave for Arrakis, which is the proper name for Dune, and that poses danger of its own, but the brunt of the focus of this chapter is on just Paul's test. As I said, it's a challenge to be overcome. So there's just a lot packed into this one chapter. Herbert basically establishes multiple conflicts right up front. Paul has to survive the Reverend Mother's test. Because he passed the test, he might be the Kwisatz Haderach. Jessica was supposed to bear a daughter for the Bene Gesserit, not a son, so there are repercussions to be had from that. Jessica has to come to terms with the fact that she can't shield her son from all danger in the universe. So that's 4 conflicts right there. We also learn some important information about melange, which is the spice that's found on on Dune that makes safe, faster than light travel possible, among other capabilities. The Spacing Guild has a monopoly on that sort of travel and kind of the spice, but not totally, and so they butt heads a lot with the Bene Gesserit. We also learned there was a conflict in the past called the Butlerian Jihad, in which all the thinking machines were destroyed, but this is only mentioned for like one brief sentence. But it's a really good example of how to handle your world building in the beginning too. Younger authors, newer authors tend to want to put all of their cool world building stuff right up front in a big info dump, but you can't explore the world you've created until you've established your characters, which is exactly what Herbert is doing in this chapter. He sort of just sprinkles in some background history items, but the focus of the chapter remains on Paul and the test. We are then primed to want to learn more about this world and also see where the characters and the conflict are going. Now there is one last, but also really huge, important point of Herbert's writing that I want to explore, and that is the prose itself. A criticism I've heard in the past about Herbert's writing is that it's barren, that's kind of bare of imagery, it's lacking in depth because the focus is really more on the ideas being presented, which was a complaint that was also lobbied against Isaac Asimov. Now I will say I don't think this complaint is fair, but from what I can tell, I think it stems from Herbert's use of third-person omniscient perspective. In modern fiction, most books are written in a limited perspective using either first-person or third-person tense. The tense itself isn't terribly important though, because the limited perspective functions the same way no matter what, but in limited perspective, you are in only one character's head in a scene. Everything in the scene will then be viewed and framed from that character's world. You can generally expect to follow a limited number of characters this way. In omniscient perspective, you jump from character to character within a scene, often from one paragraph to the next. What happens then is that you end up seeing the perspectives of many characters, which can admittedly diminish a reader's ability to connect with the characters in a deeper way. So here's a passage from chapter 1 that perfectly illustrates this concept. "Damn that Jessica," the Reverend Mother thought. "If only she'd born us a girl as she was ordered to do." Jessica stopped 3 paces from the chair, dropped a small curtsy, a gentle flick of left hand along the line of her skirt. Paul gave the short bow his dancing master had taught, the one used when in doubt of another station. The nuances of Paul's greeting were not lost on the Reverend Mother. She said, "He's a cautious one, Jessica." Jessica's hand went to Paul's shoulder, tightened there. For a heartbeat, fear pulsed through her palm. Then she had herself under control. "Thus he has been taught, Your Reverence." What does she fear? Paul wondered. The old woman studied Paul in one gestalten flicker. Face oval like Jessica's, but strong bones. Hair, the Duke's black, but with brow line of the maternal grandfather who cannot be named, and that thin, disdainful nose, shape of directly staring green eyes, like the old Duke, the paternal grandfather who is dead. It's kind of a lot going on in that short little passage. So to break it down, we start in the Reverend Mother's head with internalized thoughts. We possibly jump to Jessica, that second line's a little ambiguous, but then we definitely jump to Paul, then back to the Reverend Mother, then to Jessica, then back to Paul with his own internalized thoughts, and then finally back to the Reverend Mother to describe Paul and to deliver some important information. Because of all these switches, this style can be quite jarring at first, especially if your taste lies solely in modern fiction. The benefit to this head-hopping cinematic style, though, is that we get just a pure amount of information. As readers, we get to see every character's motives and movements, but those things are still hidden from the other characters themselves. There's a huge amount of suspense in this approach, but it's different than what we expect in limited perspective. In that approach, the suspense is not knowing what's happening beyond our viewpoint character or characters. We don't know what the villains are planning or how those plans will impact the protagonist. In Dune, the suspense is totally different. We already know who is going to betray whom, who is going to attack whom, who's allied with whom, and so on, but we have to wait to see when these plans will go into effect. It creates a really massive example of dramatic irony, where character motives are clear to the audience but not to the other characters, and so in a way it reads more like a movie viewing experience. I do think there's a lot of beauty to the clarity of Herbert's writing, and he really is a master of word choice. As an example, let's take a look at that last sentence of that passage again, specifically the word choice of that thin, disdainful nose. That word, disdainful, is packed with meaning in this sentence. On one hand, it's describing Paul being a highborn person who likely has never wanted really for anything in his life. On the other hand, it's describing the Reverend Mother's perspective towards Paul. Jessica was supposed to bear a girl, not a boy, so Mohiam is going to feel a lot of disdain toward Paul. It's moments like that that really make Dune shine, especially from the outset in chapter 1. Now I could go on and on about how much I love Dune, and I will in the future, don't you worry, but to circle back to the point of this video, I recommend anyone who needs help conceptualizing the elements of a good first chapter to read this one. Obviously, no, you don't want to copy the style and structure. In fact, you shouldn't copy anyone's work because that's called plagiarism, but I really do think it'll help. Well, I think that's enough Dune love for one day. I hope you are as excited for the movie as I am, and for the inevitable slew of Dune videos that I'm going to make and everybody else on YouTube. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Leave a comment below if you're excited for the new Dune movie and tell me why. Or if you're not excited, that's okay too. Everybody's got their own particular tastes. Or feel free to just say hello. I post videos on Sunday and Wednesday. Until next time, I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I will catch you here in the next video.